Hey guys, it's week 45. This week has all been about building infrastructure. So this will be a little bit on the engineering heavy side of things, the DevOps side of things, but I'm going to try to do my best to make this accessible to everybody. So I think it's pretty interesting. Let's get into it. Okay, first of all, an MRR update. We are at $133 in monthly recurring revenue, which is up from 91 last week. It's about 42 bucks, so that's going great. And things continue to be going well, and the need for getting onto production grade infrastructure is getting more and more important. If you guys remember from my videos from all this year, I've been running everything off of Replit and Airtable as like temporary infrastructure. It's cost me $7 to run Replit, and it's been free to run Airtable this whole time until about the past month or so when I had to upgrade to their $10 plan. Now that I'm getting a lot of paying customers, I want to move on to production grade infrastructure so that they don't have any slowdowns and there's no issues with the service reliability. My goal has always been to get enough revenue to pay for about 50% of my infrastructure costs because they do get pretty high. And that's where we are right now. So this is a great time to be doing it. Fortunately, I've been around the block on this before. And from the beginning of this journey, I kind of had a rough idea of the eventual infrastructure I did want to have, but it's still a really tricky task and there's a lot of moving parts. First up is security. Security is something that's much easier to manage when you get it right from the start. The goals here are firewalling access to each piece of the system to the other pieces of the system that need them, ensuring that your data is encrypted, and making sure that your application, your deployment mechanisms, and your developers have only the minimal access that they need to do their work. So for this whole video, I'm going to be talking about Amazon Web Services. That's the cloud provider I use. To set up my security, I'm starting with a virtual private cloud, which is called VPC, that hosts all of my infrastructure. So basically enables me to manage all of my networking and essentially have everything private and locked down by default. Most of my infrastructure is going to live on private subnets, which will make it completely inaccessible to the internet. CloudFront is a service I use and I've been using since the beginning of this journey to host all of my front end pieces of my products. So all of my websites, my products on the front end side of it, they've been served off of CloudFront, which really costs pennies on the month. I've been able to do this because my front end is completely static. I don't need a web server to run that code. And because of that, it can live on CloudFront and be globally distributed at a very fast performance. Okay, next up is database. This is kind of the trickiest one. I like Amazon's Aurora product in their RDS family. They tout it as much faster than native MySQL and Postgres, but from my experience, there's a bit of a catch on that I'll talk about in a second. The big benefits to Aurora for me are infinitely scalable storage. So whenever you do a database, you've got to pick a storage limit. And when you get close to that storage limit, you're going to have to upgrade your instance to get past it. And then you may have to do that again. This has happened to me in the past, and it's been very frustrating because there's usually downtime when you make those storage changes and you never really know how much storage to pick. Another reason I like Aurora is for zero downtime alterations. So if you do need to upgrade your database to something a little more hefty, you don't have to have any downtime for your customers. The other reason I like Aurora is they have a product called Serverless, which on its face seems really awesome. It seems like a database that scales with use without intervention. In reality, I've seen a lot of bad reviews on this, but it might be something I eventually want to move towards. Right now I won't, but Aurora makes that seamless if I want to do that. The reason I say there's a catch with the way that Amazon touts the performance of Aurora is because when you boot up an Aurora instance, a lot of times I've seen the CPU start at 10% usage with no tables, no activity, no connections to it whatsoever. You're already losing 10% of your CPU. And this has happened to us in the past where the CPU has been pegged at 100% consistently, and we have to upgrade our instance at a time we just didn't feel like it was necessary. So I'm starting off with one of the lowest level instances for Aurora because I'm trying to keep my costs low at this point, but it'll be pretty easy for me to upgrade out of that as I see use continue to grow. My Aurora costs I'm projecting at about 60 bucks a month right now to start with, and that will definitely go up as use continues. Next service up is Lambda. So I've used all kinds of hosting for my backends in the past, and there's always some kind of pain or another. The biggest challenges are making your app scalable, resilient, and cost effective. Those are sometimes competing goals, so it can be really hard to make that work right. Lambda has improved a lot since it was released, and I feel like it's ready to host my entire backend. What Lambda is a service that basically takes your application code and runs it on a per request basis. So you don't have to guess how many servers you need or how strong those servers have to be. Then when something scales, you have to kind of figure out how much to scale up and down. Lambda just handles all that for you. Lambda, it's really hard to guess the cost, but it should be fairly low, probably on the round of like $5, $6 $6. Lambda is a different kind of execution environment than traditional applications that interact with databases. And so what you end up happening is you get a lot of connections to your database that get opened and they go stale. And basically they suck out all the connection abilities of your database because of the way Lambda works. So I'm also using a product called RDS Proxy, which manages those connections so that you don't have to worry about that part of it. That's probably about $21 a month for what I'm looking at. And then another service I'm going to be using is called API Gateway. So Lambda is something that my users can't access, but that's where my application code is. So API Gateway sits in front of it and basically marshals the requests from the user to the Lambda. And that should be very cheap, just a couple pennies a month probably. Another service I'll be using is Elasticache, and I'll be using the Redis flavor of that. Elasticache is basically an in-memory cache of data. So you can put data there and it's very, very fast to get it in and out. I use this for locking mechanisms when two requests need to do something at the same time, or if I want to cache parts of the application code to make it faster. I was using in-memory locks with Replit because I knew everything was going to run on one server, so I had a guarantee that all my locks and caching would be shared. But now that I'm doing it on Lambda, I need something to replace that. For Elasticache, it should be about $12 a month because I'm using their smallest instance. And the last thing that I need is a Bastion server. So because everything in my app is locked down except for the API gateway, which is where customers are going to interact with my backend, I need an instance to securely connect myself to my infrastructure so I can get inside my virtual private cloud. Sometimes I'll need to run code manually, or I'll need to inspect the database state to see how things are going, and I need a Bastion instance to get myself in there. And I shut this instance down when I don't need it, which mostly I do that for cost reasons, but it also improves security because it closes that one open door. And this Bastion instance will be locked down to just myself. So in terms of costs on this one, this should really be like $1 or $2 a month. I'm going to put a rough prediction together for my total costs on a monthly basis. So $60 for the Aurora instance, database instance, $21 for the RDS proxy, $5 for Lambda, $12 for the Elasticache, maybe $8 to $10 for random traffic to my virtual private cloud. And that comes out to about $106 a month. That feels pretty good. We'll find out if that's accurate. So I started all of this work this week, and as of last night, I have just one thing left to get working before I can do a live test to see if I can run the whole application on this infrastructure. If this works, I'll be able to turn off the Replit instance that's currently hosting the backend for all my products and use the production infrastructure. There is one exception. I haven't integrated the database yet because there's more work to do there in migrating all that data. So we'll still be running off of Airtable until I can do that. And the other piece to all this puzzle is how do you deploy changes to your code? So I host my code on GitHub, and I have actions that run whenever code is merged into the main branch. And basically what it does is it creates a Docker image of my application code and pushes it to Lambda. So Lambda is going to get that change, turn itself on, and there's going to be zero downtime for users who are hitting the application at that moment, which is different from today. Today, I have to actually stop my Replit instance, do the build, and then start it again. So there is a brief period of time when my application is guaranteed to be down, and I do not like that. That's one of the main reasons I want to get something like this in place. Okay, let's shift gears and talk about marketing automation. So last week I almost finished with all my marketing automation emails, and this week I picked up the rest. The trouble is I've had some bugs with MailerLite, and I've been working with their support to work through those, so some of that stuff still is not quite ready. So these are things like the welcome email automation that goes out, the getting started email that comes a few days later, and a couple other check-ins. One of the things I've been trying to do, but I keep getting jammed up on, is email all the people whose trial has expired a couple weeks ago. I want to remind them of some of the improvements that I made, and I want to give them two offers. One is, if you buy Dropboard now, I'll give you the searching and location filtering feature, which is something I'm planning to put in the Pro plan. Or if you didn't want to do that, if you fill out this survey to kind of educate me on what kind of customer you are, I'll give you 14 extra days in your free trial. So that's a campaign that I've been really wanting to send out. Hopefully I can get that done the next day or two. Okay guys, that's it for this week. Next week, I hope to have migrated all of my data to my production database and closed down Replit and Airtable for good as my bootstrapping infrastructure. I also hope to have sent that marketing email to my trial users, and we'll maybe have some conversions from that. I'll be sharing those results with you next week.